Hello, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this PRC Saltillo guest webinar. We are really glad you could be here tonight. We hope you've had a good Thursday and are ready for some good information. I'm Kim Gallant, Training and Implementation Specialist for Saltillo, and I'll be moderating the webinar this evening. We are really lucky to have Christy Palmquist and Heather Prenovost with us to talk about bridging literacy and AAC for adolescents. Tonight, you'll learn how to promote more inclusivity in a literacy classroom for students with a wide variety of language skills in middle and high school. Christy Palmquist has been an educator for 27 years, spending 19 years in special education classrooms and the past 8 years as a special education literacy intervention coach for St. Paul Public Schools in Minnesota. She has collaborated with colleagues in various departments to make literacy accessible for all students and improve the efficacy of literacy interventions. Heather Prenovost is currently a consultant for PRC Saltillo in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. She was a school SLP in Minnesota for 17 years and enjoys collaborating with middle and high school literacy classrooms to improve the integration of AAC into literacy instruction. And she gets a special shout out because she agreed to do this webinar on her birthday. Happy birthday, Heather. A little bit of housekeeping items before Christy and Heather get started. First of all, if you're having audio troubles, please contact Log Me In at the number that's on your screen. And for materials, look in the handout section of your toolbar. A feedback survey will pop up as you leave the webinar, and we would really appreciate your input. About an hour after the webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email that contains the ASHA forms, tonight's handout, and a certificate of attendance for those of you not using the ASHA CE registry. If you have questions for Christy and Heather during the presentation, please type them into the chat window that's found in your toolbar. They will address as many as time allows at the end of their presentation. To receive ASHA credit for your participation today, please download the ASHA form and instructions from the materials section of your toolbar. Remember to put today's date on your form because we use that date to identify the correct course number. You must remain on the line for the duration of the webinar to receive CEUs. Again, welcome Christy and Heather. We appreciate you being here tonight to share your knowledge and expertise with us, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, I'm Heather Prenovost. Just some presenter disclosures. I am an employee owner of PRC Saltillo. And my non-financial disclosures, I'm an ASHA member and an ASHA SIG 12 member.
I'm Christy Palmquist, and I have no financial disclosures, and I have no non-financial disclosures. I'm just really excited to be here, so thanks for allowing me to join you.
All right, we are going to get started. Our objectives for the evening, as you can see on the screen, we're going to define and utilize visual supports to teach and support literacy skills, identify target skills from text comprehension to foundational phonemic awareness skills that your students should be developing, incorporating AAC skills across all literacy skills, and then make connections between verbal expression and written expression skills within the literacy framework.
So first, a little bit of background. You're going to find throughout the presentation that we're pretty visual. Pictures generate meaning for us. So Heather and I began working together on these particular topics about 4 years ago. At the time, St. Paul Public Schools was using the Fusion Reading Curriculum for special ed literacy intervention at the secondary level, and teachers and students really liked it. We were getting some good results, but upon a deeper dive in the data, we looked and we saw that certain populations weren't growing at the same rate, particularly our speech language students and our students who were English language learners. So knowing that, I reached out to Heather and another SLP in the district for their input. and said, what am I missing? What do we need to add? And so that was kind of the start of our journey of what we've been doing for the last 4 years and kind of what's reflected in this presentation. So fusion reading, I just want to show you this. This is the one and only time I'm going to reference this, but I'm referencing it because it's the jumping off point for us. And so I want you to understand about fusion is that it is a comprehensive literacy intervention. And when we talk about that in just a minute, we'll talk about what it means to be a comprehensive literacy intervention. But you can see that really the program is made up of several strategies that are predictable in their instruction and can easily be generalized across content areas.
And when we first started looking into it, since it is for struggling readers, one thing we noticed is that we need to have more visual supports for our language kiddos, and that is where a lot of our adaptations have come from.
So a lot of the research has talked about what it means to be a comprehensive reading intervention or literacy intervention. And many of these components also align with the 5 pillars of reading that we use in St. Paul. Tonight, we're just going to reference the components that appear most frequently in the research. The first is vocabulary. That means word parts and affixes. The second part is decoding and word attack phonemic awareness skills. It's kind of, I'm lumping them all together. We know that they're 3 separate components, but it all falls into that foundational skill. Fluency always is important, and obviously comprehension. Comprehension is the end goal of why we want to teach the strategies. But underlying all of this and weaving through every element is that student motivation. And so part of what we did and continue to do is tweak how do we increase that motivation with our students. And we're going to show you kind of how we do that with our choice of resources and our choice of activities and things like that.
Another piece that we liked about Fusion and that some really good comprehensive literacy programs incorporate is the connection between language and literacy. They go hand in hand. And the graphic on the right of your screen is from the Handbook of Language and Literacy Development and Disorders by Stone, Silman, Aaron, and Wallach. And it just kind of really hits home that language is the basis, that we start building those skills, and that builds strategies. We get to subject matter and we get to higher order thinking. And so we really need to make sure for literacy, if their language skills are lacking, we need to build those along the way as well.
And looking at the image on the left, think of the pasta as the language skills. It's the foundation for everything else. And what you put on top of it can vary, and the degree, the amount of sauce that you put on top of the spaghetti can vary, but it all is layered, just like with the skills and the strategies and the things. It's just a different way of thinking it, but it just really helps us to see that, and then the next slide too, that everything is woven and intertwined. You know, you really don't tackle things in isolation. If we're looking at a comprehensive reading intervention, we're talking about the different elements just kind of weaving in and out of every part that you're doing.
And as well as the weaving together, not attacking skills in isolation as we go along. We found that it's best to do multiple skills in the same activities so that you're not just drilling and killing.
So we know that there are lots of different students in your classrooms. It'd be really, really easy if every student in your classroom had exactly the same needs. That'd make teaching a whole lot easier. But we realize that doesn't happen. And so we need to think about and really take an honest inventory about what kind of students are in front of us. Are they the students who don't need any tech skills or low tech needs? Are there students that need a little bit of tech support, or are there students that need a lot of tech support? And just always have that in the forefront of your mind. Who are you thinking of? Sometimes when we do this, we talk about taking time to have this visual and listing your students underneath each category so that it's not just, oh, if I need to do this, it's, no, this particular group is going to need this, and then I need to do this for these students. So really being specific and intentional about how we're planning.
And when we look at a continuum of need, we also want to be thinking about our continuum of supports. And so we thought a good way of looking at it is, yes, we may have an AAC high-tech user who only needs some low-tech supports in certain skills. And so another way of thinking of it is kind of, if they're in this rowboat end of support, they're going to need maximum support. They might need some physical hand over hand on their device, or hand under hand, verbal directives to look at a visual on the wall, those kind of things. And we always want to use wait time. Maybe they're just kind of the life preserver, life jacket. They need that moderate level of support to meet our literacy goals. Then maybe it's just the verbal directives, some visual cues that are out and about, and again, that wait time. If we're getting into a little bit more independence, minimal support, we might be down to just using the visual cues, increasing some wait time, bringing that down, and then we want to get to where they're mostly independent. We might have checklists or visual cues out and available, but they don't need us to always remind them to use it. And we still will give them wait time when we're giving directions.
You can tell we're in the land of 10,000 lakes because we've got a whole lot of water theme, and we're really missing summer at this point. It's a little chillier here today. So what we want to do, just like when we're thinking about increasing student skill and we want to move them from point A to point B that's more difficult, we want to always be mindful of the fact that just because they're starting out needing maximum support, as we give them that maximum support and as we work on skills and developing the skills, we're hoping, and our ultimate goal is to move them, I'm going to say bands, right, categories, to the right, so that they need, ultimately, we want to move them towards that independence, knowing that it will probably take a little bit to get there. So this is one of our favorite things. This is actually one of the very first adaptations we brought into it because we saw that our students were not able to visualize what they were reading or what they were hearing. And so this is some of the work of, it's based on the work of Nancy Bell, visualizing and verbalizing.
And so looking into that therapy approach for language intervention, we know language comprehension is the ability to connect to and interpret meaning from both oral and written language. And it includes the ability to recall, get the main idea, make inferences, predict. Another component to comprehension and cognition is using the imagery. And it's been found that many of our students that struggle with reading, they struggle with visual imagery. And so this will impact their comprehension of what they're reading or what they're hearing from stories that we're doing in the classroom. We found that incorporating direct instruction using the visualizing and verbalizing model helped our students to increase those skills. We're going to give a brief overview of Nancy Bell's visualizing and verbalizing and how we modified it to use it in our fusion classrooms in St. Paul. But please do look at her curriculum for more in-depth information. So on the screen right now is the modification that we made. So she uses cues to help build visualizing skills and imagery skills. And so I created a low-tech visual support that all our students were using, and starting with the main idea, the what of things. And then we slowly add more details into what we are looking at. So, for example, when we have a picture posted for our students, we would ask, what do you see? And start very general for them.
So we prompt and we try and get them to identify this and connect it with, this is like the main idea or the big picture, the big idea. So, so we get them to respond either verbally or with their device.
And so just as an example, I am using a NovaChat with Word Power 60 Basic. And so if I had an AAC user, I might model on here that they can talk about dog. And that could be their contribution to start out in our visualizing and verbalizing.
The next step is to get into the details. And what we talk about is all of these are describers. They're describing the size, describing the location, describing the shape, the color, and all of those words we start out calling them describers, but then we get into that academic language of adjectives. And we do that because we want to make that connection for them when they're engaging in writing. So we'll start out by teaching them using just the simple language, but we quickly bridge to the academic language so that they have that frame of reference. And when they hear that in another section of class or in another classroom, they'll understand, oh, I know what that is.
And from a language standpoint, when we start building, we can prompt with questions. Tell me what colors do you see? How big is the dog? What color is the ball? Where do you think he is? My favorite is always trying to do the when, especially with all the seasons we have up in the Midwest here. And so really talking about seasons, like when do you think this is happening? And also just a reminder as we start going through this to start tying into the text. When they say, oh, it's summertime, I would then prompt with, well, what in the picture tells you that it's summertime? And again, since we're in Minnesota, they're all going to yell out, there's no snow. So starting to build their ability to cite evidence from a picture, and then we're moving to text ultimately. But that way it builds their confidence and the ability to answer those why questions, like, why do you say that? Why do you think that? Really a powerful tool.
Yeah, and what's really nice is this makes for a really easy way to practice expanding those utterances on the device because they have all the categories that you can incorporate.
So just as an example, again, if I have dog, I can now add brown. The dog is brown. And slowly build on that. Or if they only gave me dog, I can now model dog, brown, or move from dog, brown dog, and go to
ball, and maybe even play.
So we can slowly expand for them and model that expansion for them as well.
I will say the students that do this view this as a game. They really don't see it as a chore to do. And this was by far, I think, our best decision to start with this as our first step away, our first adaptation, because it was easy for teachers to incorporate. It was easy for me as a non-SLP person to latch on to this and understand my objective and then go from there. So it's great to start off with the picture and being very concrete because we always need to start concretely and move to the more abstract. Concrete picture, abstract text, word. So there's a reason why we read picture books to young children and babies. But what you need to know is that's not the ending point. You ultimately want to get to a point where you're able to do this process just with text. And knowing, how do you know when you're ready to move on, when the students are ready to move on? So if they're doing the pictures, ask yourself, based on an assessment, based on your observation, do they understand this? If the answer is yes, then move on to a simple noun like key or move on to a noun phrase like old key. And what is that going to be? How will that change the description? How will that change the appearance? What are they visualizing to help them not just see, like Heather told me one time, well, I see a K and an E, and I went, no, that's not what we're talking about. When you're reading the word key, what are you picturing? And being able to make that transition can be hard. And so it might be that cycle that you have to go back. Oh, okay, not quite. Thought they were there, not quite ready. Let's go back, or let's model.
Oftentimes we would kind of start maybe with a couple pictures and then move back into our single word phase just to get that comfort level built up again. And another key piece of it was if they are doing the I see a K, I see an E, to then, yep, those are the sounds of the letters and the letters we see. Let's close our eyes. And if I said the word key, now what is it you picture? And oftentimes they will be very hesitant to try to describe anything for that fear of being wrong. And so starting with just some basic nouns, objects that they all know, like a key or a door or a book, that
or
it can be errorless because there's no right or wrong answer. And just asking, again, giving them those prompts, is it a big car or a little car? Will help move them. And then when they are feeling a little bit comfortable, now how is that different if I say old key? How is that different from the key you were describing? You said it was shiny. Would an old key be shiny? And make that comparison for them as you go along. And again, you might have to kind of go back and forth. Some days they might do really great with phrases, and the next day you try it and they're just not there, and you have to jump back and do a couple pictures. But the idea to keep moving them forward. And it's really fun to watch as they progress through that. We won't do it justice in this short time, but again, as you want to start building, we did some visual supports based on the prompts and recommendations that Nancy Bell puts in her Visualizing and Verbalizing on how do you visualize the sentence. And so read the sentence. What do those words make you picture? Because by this point, they are starting to picture words in their head. And then really break it down. What are you picturing for the noun in the sentence? And then what are you picturing for the verb or the action? Starting to talk about those adjectives again, and if there's any other details. And then you slowly add multiple sentences. So for instance, if I have a passage that says, the sea otter swims in cold icy seas, I'd start with that single sentence. Okay, what are you picturing for that? What do you picture for the noun, which is the otter? What does he look like? What do you picture for him swimming? Ooh, it says cold. What am I picturing for a cold and icy sea? And you slowly release that into them being able to do more sentences at a time.
As you're going through this, you noticed on the previous slide when we had what are you picturing for the nouns, what are you picturing for the verbs, you saw that we also had some color coding, and we'll talk about it more when we get into the writing. But think about that in terms of students who are using their communication devices. Connect your visuals on the prompting to the visuals that are on their communication device so that they're able to go, oh, it's this kind of word, or I can find it here. And we'll talk about more of that and the impact that that has when we talk about writing. But just remember that just because we're using those colors, if you've got a different system that uses different colors, change so that they're consistent.
And then, excuse me, we still want to be always expanding upon what they're giving us. We know that our students come at us at all different levels of verbal expression and AAC expression. And so take them where they're at and then slowly add on. So like on the instance with the describing the dog, I went from just maybe the student gave me dog, I can model dog brown. If they did give me dog brown, dog brown play. Slowly always adding, and that is also true for our verbal kiddos, making sure that we are continually trying to get them towards complete sentences, which is always our language goal, and not to be held up on that if they aren't giving us that right at the beginning, just slowly expanding for them.
That's exactly it. And even if they're just giving you single words or a couple word phrase, when you're repeating it back, you're putting it in that complete sentence. So they're getting the sense that, yes, their idea is correct, and here's how you clearly, completely communicate that idea. Also remember that we're modeling in the same way, in the same manner that our students are expressing. So if they're expressing their thoughts and ideas using a device, we're going to model. Maybe we've got a screenshot poster of their device, and we're modeling where we would tap to get to the utterances that they're using, or tapping how we would ask the question. Again, you want to start out with a single word, move to a phrase, then work up to a sentence, and ultimately a paragraph. And so when we're reading our books or reading our text, our science, it's something that we can easily generalize to any different topic, any different subject, so that students can see and understand that the skills they're learning with us are skills they can use at any point in time throughout their day.
And just as another reference point, so with the visualizing and verbalizing, we started that as a warm-up, but then we would build on the books that we were reading in class, and we'd pause and use those visualizing and verbalizing skills to talk about what was happening in the book. So being able to tie that in later with other activities is a huge piece. That again, it's not just an isolation thing. Now we're going to actually use it in our reading comprehension. So if we're reading Captain Underpants, we're going to stop and, okay, what do you think he looks like, or what was he doing? Because there maybe wasn't a picture on this page. So what's the picture in your head for what just happened, so that they can see where it ties in. It's big piece is we just have to explicitly show them where these things, where these skills come in during reading, which brings us to
thinking, reading. This is so fun, but this is not your typical read aloud. I'm of a generation where we would come in from recess and we would have, okay, the teacher's going to quiet us down and get us centered again for thinking about school by reading from a book. And it was great. It was a great quiet time, great relaxing time. But that is not what thinking reading is. Thinking reading really is the act of being aware of your understanding as you read a text or listen to a text. It's the metacognitive work that happens with proficient readers, with good readers, that struggling readers don't know that should happen. They just are not aware that this should be happening because they don't have anyone modeling that for them. So if we give them the structures and supports to help them be aware and understand the process, then they can start taking more of that on themselves. And we do that by having a lot of sentence starters and not questions. We're not asking comprehension questions. We're commenting. I reread this part because I didn't understand. I was getting confused.
And I would like to rephrase this, especially to the kids as we're teaching them this, is that these are all things that as proficient readers, as adults, and even some, non-proficient readers as adults, we're doing this in our heads, and kids can't see that. And so that was just an aha moment for me, that we need to make it more in their face and explicit. And so we talk about, okay, so this is what's going through my head when I'm reading a story. I got to this part and now I go, oh, I wonder why he did that. And then we can model later, oh, so now I know why he did that, because it shows I'm thinking about what I'm reading and making connections, and also then utilizing the, oh, I was totally wrong on why I thought he was going to go jump on the trampoline, whatever it is they're reading about, so they can see us fix those errors as well, that we don't always all make the right connections. And so when we first started with Fusion, these were all just a checklist of words. And so we added visual supports for our kiddos to be able to utilize these. You can, assign students to do a certain think aloud sentence starter, and that way you can be in charge of, these students might do better with this versus this. A lot of kids struggle with being able to tell you they're confused, and so you might need to work up to that. We've had teachers cut these apart and just hand them out as cards. If those seem to be too much, too many, or at a level that your kiddos are not at, let's break it down. And so those precursor thinking skills, I like this, I don't like this, I remember what happened, or I don't understand, teaching them that I don't get it is okay. And then slowly bringing in that main idea. This is important because I predict that this is going to happen, because prediction is another big skill to be working on.
And that means the same as I wonder if. So really, Heather, the most important thing to remember here, or the most important part, is that we're commenting and making what's happening inside our brains visible for students. We're being explicit in our teaching and helping them get to this point.
To make those connections. So for example, as the screen loads for you here, we like to use texts that are already being used in the classroom. And so being that we're looking at adolescents, they should be reading the same kinds of texts that their peers are. And so when we started doing Fusion, they were reading chapter books and fiction novels right alongside their peers. And because it's being read to them, they can follow along. What we also have found, one of the books that we started using in St. Paul was I Am Malala. Well, there are modified versions of that available. And so we can take that text and break it down into easier for them to look at and talk about if it's needed, but always go aiming for high expectations. Let them participate. I've had great success with the kids just being able to pick out a couple things. So again, if you scaffold the right supports in there, give them the right prompts, model on their device, they can help participate. So this passage,
we're going to read it real quickly and then model how you might engage in some thinking reading. So it starts at the top of the page. Fazlullah's men carried out most of their attacks at night, especially the destruction of schools. In 2008 alone, the Taliban attacked 200 schools. Every morning before I rounded the corner on the way to the Kashal school, I closed my eyes and said a prayer, afraid to open them in case the school had been reduced to rubble overnight. This was what terrorism felt like. You know, this makes me think when she said every morning before I rounded the corner, I closed my eyes and said a prayer that afraid to open them in case the school had been reduced to rubble overnight. This makes me think that this has happened before, that it's not just this particular day that she's concerned about it, but it's something that happens over and over.
One night when a blast hit especially close to our home, I went to my father's side. Are you scared now? I asked. At night, our fear is strong, Jenny, he said, but in the morning, in the light, we find our courage again. And to demonstrate how we might do this on a device, we might at this level just be talking about I feel. And so I feel scared.
Yeah, and this reminds me how when I feel scared, I often go to my parents to look for some comfort. It seems like Malala was doing the same thing when she feels scared.
Another way that they can participate or that we can model is just even doing no, like. And just being able to say, no, I don't like that, that's scary, and incorporate take their feelings and make it meaningful for them, help them connect with the text.
So if they're not ready for the thinking reading prompts, we can gear up for that by employing the CAR approach.
So many younger students have gone through shared reading and the CAR strategy, but we can still utilize it and help prompt our students to build up to that thinking reading by making that comment on what we just read. Give a pause if they want to interject something, and give them enough time if they are on a device that they can formulate a thought to talk to you about it. Then we can ask a prompting question. Again, we're going to stop and we're going to wait, give them time. And if they still haven't given us anything, we can respond by adding some more details, but at least we've given them opportunities. We've given them an expectant pause that they can fill in if they have something to give us. Otherwise, we're continually showing them how they could respond with the text.
That is the hardest thing because that 5+ seconds feels like an eternity, but it is so very necessary for our students to process and, generate or put together a response.
And one way of looking at it too is we're taking a couple skills that are really tough for some of our kiddos. If they are language disordered, language nonverbal, and struggling readers or pre-literacy skills, they need time to really think about what they're reading, what they're hearing, and also formulate a response. And so practicing, and that's why it's good to have this reminder out for us. So this wouldn't necessarily be a visual for the kids, but a visual for us as the partners to remind us, pause, wait, let them, and look, if you see them kind of formulating in their head, give them even more than 5 seconds. So to see it in action, we have the picture book version, which is called Malala's Magic Pencil. So again, we're still on the same topic, and you can see that now it's just in picture form.
So here we have a page, and it says, but soon, powerful and dangerous men declared that girls were forbidden from attending school. I would be sad if I was told I couldn't go to school.
What do you think you would do if you were told that and you couldn't do something you love? And bringing it to, into experiences, and if you know of an experience that they've been told no, they couldn't do, making that connection again so they can interact with the text.
So really, again, we're starting out with the high expectation of engaging in the thinking reading, but if you're reading your students and recognizing that they're giving you crickets and it's really uncomfortable, slide into the car and start making a comment or asking a question, float back and forth. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, the ultimate goal is to get them to be making the comments, but if we need to start with the answering the question, we can do that as well.
We want to get them engaged with the text. And if that's still just not enough support, so if we need to get towards that lifeboat, using the crowd or putting the crowd in the car. And so again, this just adds a few more steps to the CAR strategy. So leave a blank at the end of your sentence for them to fill in. So if I was saying, oh, I would feel really, and let them fill in sad, scared, whatever emotion was going on in the picture or the story. Ask questions about what just happened. So kind of doing that recall piece of it. Ask questions that don't have a specific answer, using those open-ended questions. Regarding maybe experiences that they might have had that are similar, focusing on 1 or 2 WH questions for that particular purpose of reading that day, and that are supported in the picture. So they have that visual support that they can refer back to and show them that they can refer to the picture to answer the question. and then ask questions that will bridge to their personal experiences. Again, we just want them engaged and interacting with text.
Have those visual resources available. So if we're asking how would you feel, have that chart with the different faces. So even if they can't come up with the word, they can see which picture represents how they would feel, and then you can supply the language. So really having all kinds of scaffolding available. Think about it in terms of how much are you over planning?
It's better to have too much than not enough. One question that we often get asked by teachers and SLPs alike, so where do we get the books? And that is one key piece to why we liked the Fusion framework is, yes, they have suggested books, but you can utilize whatever is available to you. You don't have to buy a specific curriculum of books. So as we progress through here, if you're using News to You in your classroom, use those articles, use the strategies of thinking reading to talk about Super Bowl Sunday, if that's the article. A lot of classrooms are using Reading A to Z, use that. ReadWorks has great differentiated articles, and so print out what you need for your level.
So does Newsy LA.
As the older students, these are current event topics, and so again, they can be like their peers. You can adjust it to reading levels. May not necessarily be down to their particular level, but you can scale it back to the big ideas. Tar Heel Reader is always another good one for various topics. AAC Language Lab has great resources and great books at different levels. And again, so you can use these pictures to work on visualizing and verbalizing. You can use your thinking reading strategies.
If none of those work, you can always make your own. And the kids love this. They love seeing themselves in their books that they're reading.
And it's a great way for our AAC users, especially, to be able to engage and interact with it. If it's a picture of them doing something, or a parent sent some picture in of an event they did, it has meaning. They have things attached to that. And so it will help build conversation, build narrative around them describing what happened in that picture. You can jot it down. You now have a book that they can go back and tell you what the story was. Or if you're on a field trip, take those pictures and put it into a book so that everybody can talk about what was going on.
Oh boy, this is a touchy one because this is hard. But vocabulary is so critical. Vocabulary studies have shown that reading comprehension and vocabulary knowledge are strongly correlated. Researchers have found that word knowledge in primary school can predict how well students will be able to comprehend text that they read in high school, and limited vocabularies prevent students from comprehending a text. It is a vicious cycle, and we need to arrest that. We need to stop that, no matter how scaffolded it becomes. We need to teach affixes, prefixes, suffixes, roots. And by doing that, we can help students learn and remember words. Using word parts can be particularly useful in your content area reading, in biology, especially, in math, especially. So just being aware of, yes, we're going to adapt it if we need to, and we definitely can adapt it. But the important piece is that we're teaching them that word parts have meaning.
And the nice thing is yes, as you'll see as we get into some examples, starting with high expectations, some multisyllabic words that we know are going to be hard for kids, that we know are going to be really tricky for our AAC kids, but letting them see word parts, letting them see how we broke it apart, playing with the letters. It's just very powerful as we want them to continue to learn new vocabulary. And some of those long words, they surprise us later on and find them in their devices. And you don't think they caught it, but they did. So one adaptation is always doing word mapping. And so letting them see. Again, you can color code, not color code. And I really, really, really love the fact that in this, we are having them make a guess, having them first try a definition, teaching them that those word parts have meaning, and if we take those parts or those meaning parts and maybe just kind of moosh them together, we might be really close to a definition that was in the dictionary. So it's just, again, here's this. If we took a word like irreversible, again, this is a huge word, but we put in a visual support. Oh my goodness, this car has irreversible damage. We talk about these synonyms like permanent and show that, okay, there are other words, and then you start digging into their vocabulary, start looking at their devices and see what words are close to what we're teaching them, because again, we're teaching them synonyms. So if they come across irreversible and somebody's talking about that, they might make the connection that, ooh, that is really bad. I know that was a bad thing that happened. If it's irreversible, it's broke. Any of those that are at their level that we can slowly build up.
That's the key. You know, just like with visualizing and verbalizing, we started talking about the detail words as describers, as a way to enter in and then get up to the academic language of adjectives or adverbs. We're starting with the big academic language. We're giving them a visual to help them connect, and then we're helping them generate a synonym or another word that is their anchor point, their entrance point. Oh, that's that word that I know. A big word, an academic word, is this.
To see how we would work with irreversible on a vocabulary word map, we break up the prefix ir and re, and we talk about that it means not, back, again. Those are all core words that we can be talking about on devices as well. So again, they might not have irreversible on their device. I'd be very surprised if they do. And we find these meaning parts that they can interact with. Turn is on their device. Fit, can be, those are on their device. Making a guess, so we could make a guess that, ooh, it can't be turned back. And the real definition, you're not able to be changed if it's irreversible. And again, I'm going to have many people say those are just way too hard for my students. And so then we say, all right, we can still work on roots and prefixes and suffixes. Let's just start with something smaller. So start with just the root view.
View is the ability to see something. That's what we're going to tell them. And then we'll have a picture. And this, what are you doing? What is he doing? Oh, look, looking. All right, good. So that's where we're going to remember. We're going to remember look. Now we talk about pre. Oh, pre is something we do before. So if we say preview, oh, we look before.
And I apologize for the light colored font on this one, but so we can fill in. And again, they might not be doing this on their own, and we'll show you some adaptations in a little bit, but they are starting to see those breakdowns. The view, this is how it looks. We'll fill in the meanings. And so again, just keep building up. Showing them examples in different contexts is always a great way. So preview can be, you know, that green screen you see at the movie before your movie starts. So we see it before. Another way of it, visualizing it for them, is making that combination. So we had view and pre in two different visuals. Now I can put them this plus this, give them another synonym or another phrase they might be aware of, sneak peek. Just any way that you can slowly release to them, that we can build words that have more meaning.
Just like that, we're going to stay with the same root, view. We could say re means again. And so review, oh, I'm going over my checklist again, or my list of things to do again. I'm looking at it again.
And if you have these on cut apart cards, so view and re, we can swap out re for pre. Being able to have these pictures, can they match? So again, if they're not able to verbalize what it means, could they match the picture that we put for review with the word review and make that connection and show their comprehension? Also, if it works better to have them build the definition, check things over, checklist, that was always a good one. What are we looking at again?
So what if those words are still too hard? And they may be.
So the key thing is always, we want to expand our students' vocabulary knowledge and usage. And so I always say start high, and you can always scale back. Exposing them to words that they can use, as well as words that are just out of their reach. So yes, irreversible might be out of reach, but we can scaffold back. We can use preview in so many different contexts and in their world and their experiences. Review, same thing. So don't underestimate what they can do, but you know your students best, and you do know that if I'm putting the word irreversible in front of them, and even with scaffolding, it's just still too much. There are other ways to do it. Another thought is to use a modified vocabulary word mapping. Have them draw a picture, find the symbols, put that in.
We just talked about this today at work with one of my teachers, where we just had the words on strips of paper, and so they were pre-cut, so you're just having them glue the word on there. We can talk about the guess, have the definition already printed, and then have 3 symbols or 2 symbols for them to pick from. Which of these symbols best represents that word to them, so that there's some choice and voice. And if they don't want any, but they do want to engage in drawing the picture, because some of them will, then that's okay too. So really adapting and making it less writing and more visual, but still working on developing vocabulary. And so my teachers are using this particular approach with the vocabulary from their unit plan, and they happen to be using Unique Learning, which is also the same company that does News to You, but they're using it with that to front load their vocabulary for the unit, so that the students will have that anchoring their understanding.
Another modification or adaptation is using chart paper. Use Postits. Have them pick stuff up, fill in together. Another one that I loved that one of our staff did is in the picture symbol area, they gave them choices. Like, what would fill in for this? What could I reset? Like, testing that comprehension of the word again. It's just a great way to carry it over and use it in a new context. So if we were talking about resetting our iPads, we are all kind of really good at that, right? But what else do we have to do? After a storm, we had to reset. Do I have to reset my dog, my clock, or Reds? And let them choose. And so they can show that they've grasped the meaning outside of what we just taught them, because a lot of kids will do really well with just the way we taught them and that context only. So this is another great way to take it. And I love the separate Postits for the root and the prefix. So it's just a great use of it.
Another way to scaffold down is by using compound words. If that's where your students are entering in, then that's where we go. And that's totally fine.
So this was modified from a compound combos activities that's in phonics they use for reading and writing by Patricia Cunningham. And so she has a list of these great compound words that you can take a group of maybe 5, and they all intermix. So I'm focusing on 5 compound words, but they all incorporate some similarity. And so you cut them apart. Now I can move them around, manipulate them, and that can be at any level. Or you can write them wherever your students are at, meet them, but they're still seeing words have parts. And if I take work, I know what work means. If I take place, well, I know what place means. What happens when I put those 2 together? Same with homework. I know what home is. I know what work is. What is homework? And so just make it meaningful for them. Again, if you're still thinking these are just too high, too much, use vocabulary words that you already have in your classroom. Use the compound words. A lot of classrooms and a lot of language therapy is working core words. Use those. We'll talk a little bit later. There's a lot of overlap between core words and sight words. So you're, 2 birds with 1 stone. Here's another core word board that you might be using. Daily living and functional words. So again, from News to You or Unique Learning System, they already have these pre-done low-tech boards, and use some of those words and really talk about what is a washer, what is wash cycle, and make it meaningful. Maybe you're actually doing an activity where you get to do that, and so they can role play it and pantomime it. Whatever's going to work for your kids, but then making sure that we are making sure they comprehend it, interact with it, and use it in text later. So not just drilling vocab words, but now let's have a passage that has the word in it and that we can talk about. I know what that word means.
And always remember that you have to have those words. It's not just do the word, teach the word, say the word, write it in a sentence, use it in a sentence, but it's post it in the room, because students will be looking for those around the room. Having that word wall really increases the odds that they'll continue to use the word consistently once you're done with that unit or once you're done teaching it. It's really essential for building that vocabulary.
And if you're using symbols in your room, have the symbol with the word wall. I love coming in and seeing text words, symbol words. And if you've got multiple device users, find what's working for them and have it displayed. It can get a little too much sometimes, so find that balance and find that happy medium, but have them around. And they do start looking around and finding those words and go, oh yeah, I do remember what that word is.
So yeah, remember literacy intervention. And writing really isn't addressed in a lot of literacy intervention curricula, but it is. Remember that basket and how everything in that basket is woven together? Kind of like that with writing. It is an essential piece in being able to communicate what you now understand or what you're trying to understand. And so really, you do have to address writing as well as reading if you're going to have an effective literacy intervention.
And we know not all our students can write in the standard way of paper and pencil. So utilize what they have access to, utilize what they're able to use, whatever their motor skills. So having that, flexible idea of what alternative pencils are. If they're using their iPad and they can use that keyboard, great. If they're using a regular keyboard on a computer, great. Modified or adapted pencils and pens if they're doing fine motor. Utilize the keyboards within your communication device. Almost every device I know out there has a keyboard accessible, and there's a lot of discussion going back and forth between QWERTY keyboard and an alphabetic layout. I always say give them a shot at the QWERTY keyboard. We all have to, adapt to it at some point. Why not let them try it? So use what is available and use that to let them write. And yes, there is that back and forth of our communication devices are for verbal expression or how I express, but it can also be used for writing. A lot of them have capabilities to save documents, send to emails, send to Google Docs, whatever it is. so that it can be turned into writing, or they can tell us and we can jot it down as well. Just make sure that we're using some form of writing with our kiddos.
It's really important to have that flexible definition or flexible understanding of what it means to produce writing. Just like it's important to have that flexible definition of text. Text can be pictures, it can be a video clip. Pixar makes some great shorts, and you can totally do some great visualizing and great prediction with that, or problem solution work with that. But having that flexible definition of text, that means that it does not have to be words on a page to be considered text. The memes all over the internet, that's text. You're making a whole lot of inferences about something by those pictures. Have that same respect and flexibility when we're talking about writing.
And we want to refer back to, again, our kids are on a continuum of needs on what they need to learn, where they're at with their writing and their skills. And so then that also means we need to refer back to what kind of supports can we give them, what do we provide to them to get them to be able to write. Because if we ask them to write a 5-paragraph paper, they're all going to, probably have a mutiny. But we can get them there. We can start with baby steps and bring them up. We can start in our rowboat and guide them. They may not get to our 5-paragraph essay. That's okay. But we want to continue to move them up in their abilities.
This is one of my favorite things. So we took what was already existing on our AAC device boards. And we said, well, shoot, why can't we use this to encourage or promote more understanding with writing? And so we really use it as a tool to scaffold and by color coding things. So it's really important. One of my favorite sayings that I learned a really long time ago, I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but really long time ago, was what's essential for some is helpful for all. That color coding and those communication devices are essential for some, but they can be helpful for everyone. And think about how you're developing or how you're gaining a better understanding of what it means to write a complete sentence, or write a sentence that is more descriptive. So we can do some of that by using these tools that were identified or initially designed for our AAC device users.
And again, this visual support, having it out there, helping reference, and as you see, we started with in parentheses, and this again was based off of word power for one of the students that I was working with. The groups is where I'm going to find a lot of nouns, a lot of objects. Pronouns are going to be yellow. They're going to be my people. Actions are my verbs. They're green, and so on and so forth. And so, but we're going to still refer back to that academic vocabulary. Hey, your groups, those are nouns. Those are all those things we're talking about. Those people, hey, those are pronouns. That's our I, our we, she, and making that connection for them. I've used this with verbal kids and nonverbal kids to help, like Christy said, build those complete sentences. And I used it on this screen where we gave blanks. So let's start with building just a basic sentence. And if they can fill in the blank, great. If they need guidance, they need a word bank, they need a symbol bank, but have some yellow words. So the dog ran. How can I make that more descriptive? What if I was reading it, what would make it more detailed?
You could tell me about what the dog looked like a little bit.
Okay, what if I added a describer, a pink word? Oh, like brown. So now I could have the brown dog ran.
Now I know it's not like my brother's dog or like your dog.
My dog is black, so I'm not talking about him.
No, I'm talking about a brown dog.
how can I make it more descriptive? So I've already got my describer word and my noun and my verb.
What did the dog do?
They
ran. What did they run after?
He ran after, his favorite thing.
Yeah.
Is the ball.
Yeah.
His ball. So again, we want to keep expanding. And so, probably preaching to the choir, but start with where they're at. If they only can give you a dog, what did the dog do? Those little prompting questions, and now show them how to write that, or model writing it, or show them on their device how now look at this as a sentence, because I did the dog ran.
Yeah. And what's really nice is that when you're talking about editing for writing, that color coding can be a great tool to give them support around how they need to fix their writing. Oh, you want me to include this kind of word, or tell me more about this, or this isn't a complete sentence, it's missing something, what is it missing? And give them the color coding to help them do that. And again, we're always scaffolding. If they can only give us a single word, great. Now can you give us a phrase? Now can you write a complete sentence? Now let's build that and combine those sentences and organize those sentences in a way that they create a meaningful paragraph or multiple paragraphs. You can just take that and take that further and further. So really, again, you're going to see that we never want to stay stuck where they are. That's not our ending point.
And so that, well, what if this is still too much? A lot of elementary and middle school classrooms have been doing predictable chart writing. So this is a picture and an example from Dr. Karen Erickson's website, Literacy for All Instruction. And again, so let's do it as a classroom. Let's start with a sentence starter, and there's nothing wrong with giving them sentence starters, and we fill in the blank. It shows them what the complete sentence is going to look like. Break them up, cut them up, reconstruct sentences. It's just a great way. It can be the same. My favorite toy is, I like any of those starters, they can all participate with. Or if you're using text that you're talking about, use predictable chart writing to talk about the text, and maybe they're all recalling something different from the text. You can do that.
This is one of my favorites. If they're not ready to interact with traditional text, give them those symbols. I like, and then let them pick the symbol that represents what they like. Either way, they're interacting, they're sharing their thoughts, they're expressing their ideas. It's important that they be able to do that. So we need to provide multiple means for them to do that expression.
And again, if they're using symbols to select their choice, we can still write on our predictable chart writing what their response was. So now they see the written form of swimming if they chose swim.
If you're doing this with your thinking reading book, and think back to our example book, Malala's Magic Pencil, we can use the sentence frame, I remember, and then we can talk about what are the events in the story. And then once they have that, then you could work on sequencing their writing, their words, so that they can then get into the next topic that we're talking about, which is story retell.
Well, and this is also a great precursor to annotation. And so again, our high schoolers are learning annotation. And so if you can use Post-it notes, if you can use, whatever they used, a symbol that we can stick to the page to help them. Again, if they're doing the I remember statements and we're building upon I remember this, I remember who this was, I remember this, now we can show them that those sentences combine into a summary. So we're building up. We're starting small and building, to the main core standard that we're aiming for. And like Christy said, our next topic then is retelling stories.
Because we really want to tie everything together and really have students demonstrate that they're understanding what they read or what was read to them. And so as they show us with the retell, we'll be able to see where the continued gaps are, whether it's with visualizing and verbalizing and thinking, reading, with vocabulary and not understanding the text, or writing. And then we use that to guide in us in what we need to go back and work on or to continue to strengthen.
And so like we said, we're doing this like holistic approach to it. We aren't just one day only doing vocabulary words. One day we're only doing some visualizing. We're only listening to reading. We can work on all these skills continuously, but when we get to some of the comprehension things and checks, now we know, okay, maybe I need to do more with some WH questions, or I need to do more with vocabulary development.
You know, sometimes, I don't know how many of your schools use Avid in your buildings, but we use Avid in St. Paul. And so one of the things that they use is something called Reading for the Gist. And really, when I look at it, and I'm looking, you're just asking the WH questions in a more structured or more in-depth manner, more complicated, more language heavy. I don't care how you say it. But if we can even adapt it to make it easier for them to pick up on what it is that they're asked to do, that's great. And then they can demonstrate their understanding and demonstrate that they're able to do the work that everybody else is. They just need it in maybe just a little bit different format.
So another idea is to kind of create this framework or this template. And so if I fill in the blank on the right with who was in the story, John, what was he doing? Swimming. Where was he doing this? At the swimming pool. What was going to happen next? Then he got out and dried off. Now I can put this into a sentence. John is swimming at the swimming pool. Then he got out and dried off. So now we're slowly building that narrative. I can retell the story, but I broke it down into those simpler WH questions, but it shows them how this forms a sentence or a retell. If that is still not where your students are at, if it's still a little too much, go back to low tech and talk about beginning, middle, and end. If you have symbols, if you have sentences that they can, slide and manipulate into where these go, or their pictures. It's the nice thing with having technology available to us. If you've got iPads, have them snap pictures of the pages in the book, and now maybe you can print them and you can order them using apps that you can drag the pictures around and put them in order. I've seen classrooms use Pic Collage, because you can have your photo library and you can drag the pictures around, put them in order. What happened first? What happened next? Super easy, super inexpensive.
And it's a great alternative that doesn't require them to be proficient writers. They can still engage and show you what they know without the labor-intensive look up at the screen, copy, look at the page, copy, which is just painful to watch.
It is. I'm going to show an example of, with Saltillo's word power pages, you can use pages built into their device for this very thing. We'll toggle over to my device. And so I pre-set up on this page. So if I go into, it's on our groups page, it does not want to. But my apologies on that. Technology sometimes just doesn't want to work with us. So in the groups page on WordPower 60 Basic, there's a button at the bottom of the screen called Stories and Scripts. And when you click on that, you have multiple stories and saved phrases, 1, 2, 3, 4. You go in there, and whatever they've already put together in their speech display bar. So if I talked about she was sad, I can now save that message to one of the buttons in there. I've also incorporated a spot in there where we can take a picture of that book page again, and now I can put right next to it what I put together as my sentence or what I'm doing to retell. It's also a great way to talk about what we did in class, retelling events that they actually did. They can share with somebody. It's just really kind of a cool use of their technology. So
they could take it home and their parents could see what they did and they wouldn't have to remember it all the day. Because I know that my kids, I got what they did first and what they did last. Kind of missed the middle parts. Are we frozen? There we go. There.
All right, so that leads us to, okay, great, we're looking at all these higher level skills, but my students still are struggling with those foundational skills. And so again, we don't want to just be doing foundational skills. We don't want to apply that model of, well, they haven't met sounding out words, so I can't go do thinking reading. I can't have them retell a story. Let's work on it all together and continue to build it. They may need some pull-out time or some individual group time to talk about those things, but let's do it within. And so what do we mean by those foundational skills? That's going to be the alphabet knowledge. That's letter sound correspondence, rhyming, syllables, consonants and vowels, core words and sight words. We're not going to go deeply into everything you could possibly do. We're going to give you a few ideas and examples, and then utilize things like Dr. Karen Erickson's or Janice Light's websites, because they have more ideas on activities that you can incorporate. Use things from News to You, Unique, any of those curriculums out there.
Any of those tools that you can use for initial sounds, ending sounds, and have picture clues to help them scaffold. They can also use their phonics keyboard that's on their devices, and so that they can hear what that letter should sound like, what that short vowel should sound like, what the long vowel should sound like. And so giving them the tools so that it's not just you as the teacher that's producing it, but they can practice with it as well.
And our nonverbal kids don't always get to play with the sounds of words and practice, or just even make nonsense sounds. And so letting them do things like this on whatever they have available to them, so that they can play with how things sound. It's a great way to do that.
Think about a great informal assessment. How well are they hearing things? How well are they understanding the sounds? Using the picture sorts, which words begin with the B sound, which words begin with the O sound, which sounds have the S, just anything that we can do to help see and really just know which ones are they struggling with. And then so that you can really target then that practice when you're working more individually.
And use word families, use rhyming words, same thing, sort them. If they can do it with the pictures, okay, let's switch over to some of those, single syllable words like sun and mat, and can now they sort them. Starting with initial sound is always easier, and then moving to the ending sound, which ones have the same ending sound. Sometimes it's really helpful to be able to use manipulatives, and so use the letter magnets, use these letter cards. We did color coding because a lot of the curriculum in St. Paul was using vowels are red and consonants are blue. Some of our word families are in yellow, so now I can manipulate those and cut them apart, and I can play with b, at, k, at, and change them up. Sometimes seeing them do that, it makes it more accessible.
And it's amazing how even that kind of activity is so well received at the secondary level. I had these tough boys, tough middle school boys, and they love that. Again, they really think it's a game, but holy cow, they were doing some really good learning. And they were not afraid to play with the tiles or play with the cards. They loved it. It really was empowering for them.
and starting to build longer words. It's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. And it really does help when we're talking about syllables. We're talking about a closed syllable versus an open syllable. Having those color-coded cards really helps the students understand visually what that means.
And here's just another reference to the phonics keyboard that could be available on some of your devices.
But hey, Heather, I am supposed to be doing core words.
So you're in luck because a lot of our sight words and core words overlap. So on the screen, anything that's got a red box around it is an overlap between core words and sight words, like the first 100 sight words. And so I can be addressing these in multiple ways and still be working on our core word language and our sight words for reading. And the fun part is so find them in your books. You're reading, point out where those words are, or guess what? You can make your own Google Slide books, PowerPoint books, whatever you're using. I also then like to incorporate with alphabet books. We're working on the sound. Let's find all the words. But I'm also working on my is my core word. So in my sentence, I can find, Rick and Ron are my friends. And I highlight it as we're going along. Same with the next sentence. I like to ride. There's that R sound again. My bike. Easy way to target so many different things. We're now working on our foundational skills. And afterwards, I can be like, so what happened? What were things that you liked to do?
You can also adapt this and use the symbols and the prompts from their AAC devices, from their communication devices. Same premise, but you're giving them the sequence that they would use in order to show what this says.
So we're working on the core word of go. And I used our chat editor software available on saltillo.com, and I created with the word power 60 basic, how would they be able to formulate that sentence? And again, we don't want to get stuck on symbols during text, but sometimes it is helpful for them to see that they are able to do it. And then as they get comfortable, we take away the symbols, and now we're focusing on the text because literacy skills are around the text. And maybe we only incorporate just the core word from their device on that page to emphasize that versus an actual sequence. Yep. So again, playing with it, don't get stuck at one level.
And don't represent every single word.
You don't have to represent every single word. That's not necessary. These were short phrases that did get represented.
Okay, so it's all well and good, but how do you know if it's having an impact on your students and their learning? And so really the importance of monitoring and assessing and reflecting on data is so important. So it's not just a once a year kind of thing, or just right before they do their annual IEP or any of those things. And so really we want to use some tools to help us. And one of the things that we like to use in St. Paul is the 4-box method. Here are my students, they're proficient and they made growth. Or they're not proficient, but they made growth. Are they proficient and are staying stagnant? Or are they not proficient and staying stagnant? Hopefully we don't have anybody on the right-hand side. Hopefully they're all on the left-hand side. Hopefully what we're doing is having an effect, an impact. But then if they're in that top left box, great. Give yourself a high five. Keep doing what we've been doing. If they're not proficient but making growth, again, what did the student make adequate growth? Are they moving towards? We don't expect that they're going to go from a pre-primer level to a on grade level reader in half a year or a year. We're not expecting that, especially at the secondary level where they're way delayed. But are they making growth? Are they making that gap closing growth? Are we making in a year's time at least 2 years growth or more? You know?
And maybe it's just looking at, did we move skills
Exactly.
or less support needed? And so it's those really looking at all the pieces of it. If they went from not knowing any letter sounds to, 5 letter sounds, great. We're still not proficient, but we made that little baby step.
So we know we are going to keep doing what we're doing and continue to accelerate. So just having that personal reflection, that professionalism that we all need to partake in to be able to say, okay, now looking at my continuum of need, where are my students? Who now needs what? Have some of the students moved in their needs? Do we have fewer kids that need some of the high tech or high levels of support? And
so, even if it went from, okay, they started needing maximum support to participate in our activities, and now at the end of the school year, we are closer to maybe minimal support, those kind of things. That's great, and that does show growth, and we know that it's working. We just got to keep going and keep moving, and it's always slow. We know that with some of our kiddos. So with that, we will open up for questions. Here is some contact info if you're not able to stay online and do some questions. And then there are some things that will pop up after the webinar closes. We'll start looking at the chat window and answering any of the questions you might have.
Okay, Christy and Heather, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We are going to take a few minutes to answer some questions, and Christy and Heather did say they will remain on the line afterwards for a few minutes to answer questions. So if you can stay with us for another 3 minutes to ensure that you're on for the entire time to receive CEUs, that'd be great. And let's go ahead and start with the first question. Christy and Heather, they asked, Danielle asked, what are your favorite apps or programs to write personalized stories for students?
Ooh, we haven't done as much with apps, just because sometimes that is a barrier to getting to things. But I'm trying to, Storybook Creator, I believe is the name of the app, and that's a great one because you can incorporate text, voice recordings, and pictures, and so that's,
I like OSnap.
OSnap
is a nice one too.
Okay.
Where it allows you to snap a picture of something and then fill in, add in, so you can have that picture foundation and then the text underneath it.
So those are the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head, but I would love to start gathering some of those.
Yeah. If anybody has any ideas, send them. That'd be great. Anything that we can do that to create a community of learners to help support the kids.
As you noticed from most of our examples, we used a lot of like Google Slides and PowerPoint and working with our students on it versus just having them do it. Good question.
Okay, we next have a question from Mandana. For giving details while asking a question regarding thinking, reading, could we give choices in our questions or just expanding questions?
Both. And that was one key thing when I started working as an SLP in a classroom with Fusion, is that we could play off of each other and I could model what the teacher, so if the teacher stopped and did her thinking reading and then paused to let others participate or expand on it, and if nobody was there yet or we needed more details, I could be kind of her model, her plant. That
You're
sort of
Vanna.
thing. I could be Vanna. So if they're still not giving you enough, so if they give you just the I liked it, great. Now expand on that and be like, I liked this part. How about you? And adding the because, slowly scaffolding. Or if they're like, I didn't get it. Oh, I didn't understand this part either, and expand and give them some details. Or just modeling a longer sentence for what they did provide for details. So yes, anytime you can use both layers of adding more details using the visual cues.
I think even having the visual cues in for that lower level, having them on like popsicle sticks, you know, and they can even, you could even take a survey. Show me, ooh, I feel this, you know, and have everybody show. So again, you're getting that engagement in some way. And then you can call on people to tell you more.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can model with your SLP how to do more, how to expand those utterances.
Okay, great. It is 7:30, so for those of you who need to leave, please feel free. We have a couple more questions that we're going to address at this time. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's see, Heather and Christy, we have a question. What are your thoughts on the claim that AAC does not teach a child to read?
Well, I always go back to the initial purpose of AAC and a device is for that expressive piece. However, we can use those, the words that pop up on there. I know there are settings that help, like within the Nova chat, where it will expand and just be the whole screen. And so we can be looking at the words and pointing to the words after they've created it. And so, in my opinion, it's a tool to access literacy. It's not necessarily teaching them reading on their device. It's still our job to point out and make the connections, but it's their way of interacting with and engaging with text and building literacy skills. And so watching our students who have done this framework, and they're more comfortable, I feel like, with their device because they're learning where more words are.
Mm-hmm. I think, too, one of the main points of thinking reading, and one of the very important pieces of interacting with text, is to have that one-to-one correspondence where you're pointing at the word and you're seeing the word, or you're having like, oh, when the author said this and calling it out, then it's giving them those clues. If they're creating something on their device, if they're expressing their thoughts on the device and then reading it with the one-to-one correspondence on their device, it's a tool to help them, and you're able to assess, do they have those concepts of print? Are they making those connections? It's a two-way street, you know. Yeah, I agree with Heather that it's not, you know, they're not teaching them to read, but it's expressive, receptive.
It's kind of, if we took away AAC when we're doing literacy, we're still talking about speaking, we're still talking about listening, the reading of it, and the writing. And so the only kind of thing we're swapping out is they might not be verbally speaking. They're using their device. So yeah, I get where there are the camps that are like, no, this is just not it. But again, I don't feel like we are only using AAC to teach it. It's just one tool in your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Essential, helpful for all.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about making it happen. So how do you organize your day to incorporate all of this? Another question, how long does the writing process take from beginning to end? What does the service service delivery model look like? That kind of thing.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
okay.
So what we did to start out with is we took the framework from Fusion, and that does block out. So if you have an class period that's an hour for reading, then 5 minutes doing a warm-up, 20 minutes of maybe doing vocabulary work, maybe 20 minutes of doing thinking reading, and another 15 minutes of strategy. So you're working on prediction or this, and then you're gonna do some type of exit.
Or writing.
And then you swap out a couple components every
Usually
day.
we did we spent some time, but most classes had an hour. Some were lucky enough to have 75 or 80 minutes, and that was great. But it was more about how do you divide that time. so that you're hitting everything. And really, at the beginning, it's a lot of direct instruction around how do we do visualizing and verbalizing? How do we do vocabulary? How do we do thinking, reading? How is that happening? And then, like we did here, like we talked about all the time, it weaves together. So even as we're doing thinking, reading, we might not have visualizing and verbalizing on the schedule for the day, but in that thinking, reading time, odds are pretty good there's going to be a section where we can incorporate the practical application of visualizing and verbalizing. We're engaging and we're thinking, oh, we're creating that picture, that's visualizing and verbalizing. We're also modeling the metacognitive work that's happening as we're reading. We're doing the same thing with vocabulary. You know, we're visualizing that word. We're creating that picture, or they're giving us a picture of what that word looks like. We're doing writing, we're incorporating the writing throughout, but we try and do 2 to 3 chunks of something during that time frame, just so that it gives them variety, and it's cyclical, so that they're not forgetting in the gaps between when we would hit it again.
And one other piece that we didn't have in the slides, but with the writing, Christy incorporated some of the Kansas writing strategies, and so taking that color coding and utilizing some of those strategies. And so again, start with identifying your nouns and let's brainstorm verbs together. Okay, now let's make sentences that combine these, and slowly building. So we always say, take what you have. Maybe you already have some curriculum in your room that you're using. Now, and the biggest thing is block out that time, block out your sections that I'm always going to hit. And like Christy said, cycle through doing it every day. That was kind of the bigger piece that was beneficial, I think, is that there is scheduled time to be working on these skills with our kids every day, because they've made it to middle school and high school struggling still. And especially our AAC kids who maybe not have had any real comprehensive curriculum around literacy, just exposure every day.
You can incorporate the predictable chart writing or some kind of writing in their, like if they're in a program setting or a self-contained setting where they're using zones of regulation and they do their morning check-in. You know, I'm in the blue zone because I'm in the green zone because, you know, that kind of thing, or good morning, I'm feeling, and they do that a lot just in any setting, just so that people are aware of how their day's going so far. But you can definitely incorporate that writing in there. And then you can do the predictable chart writing and read their writing, or have it be the sentence frame and then the visuals, you know.
And you know, going back to some of those things that you learned as, you know, literacy interventionists, with shared reading or thinking reading, we can take the same story, the same passage, and use it for a different purpose each day. So maybe today we're really doing the vocabulary around this. Maybe today we're really hitting home on the WH questions. Today we're looking at it again, and we're going to talk about the mood and really getting some of the higher level. So you don't have to constantly be finding new text as well.
Think about your favorite movie. You know, we all have that favorite movie that if you're scrolling through the TV channels and you see that it's on, you stop and watch it because it's one of your favorites. And every time you watch that movie, you might pick up on some little nuance that you missed the last time. It's the same thing for when we're reading for different purposes or reading the book multiple times. The students are going to pick up on more and more. In response to how long does the writing take to finish it? Yeah, we're not done. It's never done. That is the constant struggle, and it's my next steps on what I want to do next is kind of figure out how to be even better with that. And so we've got some things in the works in some of our literacy intervention classes right now. But it's an ongoing project.
I know, it's
if anybody has an idea, share.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more question, please. We have several questions about teacher buy-in, and if you found anything helpful to get teachers excited about this and working it into the many, many things that have to happen.
Here's how you do it. I'm going to spill the secrets because we had the yeah buts. I would say the easiest way to get teacher buy-in, and I just talked about this last week too with an OT from Kansas, visualizing and verbalizing. It's the easiest entry point ever. It's concrete enough that they can pick up on it. Someone without a language background can pick up on it. And once they see how they can do that, they're going to want more. And they're going to go, okay, that was awesome. Oh my gosh, you have to hear my kids. They're doing so well. But taking off of that, what we found helpful, and I've been out of the classroom for 8 or 9 years, whatever. I lose track because it just all blends together. But my heart is still in the classroom. My brain is still in the classroom, and I'm thinking as a teacher, no matter if I'm a program manager or an implementation person for this, my heart and my head are always in a classroom and saying, if I was the teacher, what would be helpful for me to have? And so what we did is we created multiple options, different scaffolding points, different entrance points for them, and shared them in a common place. If you're looking at this for visualizing and verbalizing, here's some resources. Copy this. Here's how you can utilize it. And we would do ongoing training, ongoing professional development. We have a community of collaborative learners that it's really kind of funny. On one of the platforms that we use for sharing, they're constantly having conversation. Hey, this activity worked really well. Does help. My kids are struggling. What am I missing? So having that set up so that they've got a community to rely on when you're not there. But I would say the entrance point, would you agree?
I would say
is that visualizing and verbalizing.
Verbalizing, and then the really basic thinking reading.
Yeah.
One, just because it's hard to grasp and put our heads around, but starting there, because once, and again, you're not going to have participation from all your students right away, but as you keep doing it and being consistent with it, they do start to help participate. And that first and foremost, you're going to get the engagement with the visualizing and verbalizing, just because everybody can talk about a picture in some way, shape, or form, even if it is you prompting them and they are saying it's a dog. And then you build from there. And just watching their confidence build is huge. And so when you can do that, or as Christy said, having that flexible definition of text. And if we're going to do thinking reading, but we're not ready for text and listening to a story, then using Pixar shorts, using wordless videos. Simon's Cat is always a fun one. And pause. Let's talk about it. I think this is going to happen next. So I'm teaching prediction. Mm-hmm.
Those prediction cards where you've got a series of this picture, and then a question mark. What's going to happen next? They're going to have to read the first picture, read the second picture, and be able to figure out, oh, the logical thing that could happen. Let's brainstorm. I think, let's do some writing. I think, what? And be able to share. And then, who was correct?
I'd say pick one thing and just go with it. And that has been the most successful. And also, if you can highly encourage them to try it and give it a shot, and work through the but my kids can't do this. Yeah, but my kids can't do this. Having that high expectation and let them try.
You know what else I forgot? Because it's been a while since this whole thing started, is it was most effective initially. It was most effective in places where the SLP would push in and model that initial stage in the classroom. So if you've got a situation where you've got multiple students in that particular class section, if the SLP can push in one morning for 15 or 20 minutes, you know, and teach that part so that the classroom teacher can hear the language as well, and get to experience it that way. And then be able to have that conversation, well, why did you do this? Or, okay, so if I'm going to do this tomorrow, I'll do this. You know, that kind of thing is really important, that collaborative culture with your SLPs, with your OTs, with your related service providers. It doesn't matter. Because as classroom teachers, we can't know everything. I think I'm so privileged to be able to have worked and learned so much from Heather, because she's got the SLP lens of looking at things.
And then I learned all the literacy stuff from her lens and went, oh, now I can see where language overlaps the moving of the basket. And it just really does, once you can start building those layers. And so, yeah, just pick something and start with it.
Pick one.
Okay, I think that's a great place to start. Thank you for some amazing ideas and resources tonight. We appreciate it so much, and thank all of you participants for hanging in with us. We sure appreciate you being here and hope to see you again on another webinar. Good night now.
And wish Heather a happy birthday.
Yay.